Fire Radio.
Hey everybody, it's Rob, National Fire Radio. I am super excited about tonight because I've been trying to get Matt on an episode of National Fire Radio with me on the Frontline Mindset. Long story short, but we're probably going to go way over an hour on this tonight. When we started National Fire Radio, I found essentially a Fire X talk with Matt in it, where he was talking about I think it was the pride in what you ride was
pride in what you ride, but more importantly, pride in how you ride.
Pride in, yes,
so that was kind of a derivative of an article that I had gotten to publish, and so yeah.
And I was just starstruck to talk to you, and you were surprised that I was, just getting calling you up on the phone, and then we got to meet each other at FireX Talk a year later. And you've had a very interesting career, and you actually, I can remember I called you and talked to you a little bit about some of the career moves you made and how I was just kind of blown away that you did what you did, and I don't think I had the fortitude to take the plunge, so to speak. So, but why don't we start the introduction off? Matt Adkins, tell us who you are, man.
Yeah. So my name's Matt. I, like most people, found the fire service kind of accidentally as a volunteer in my hometown in 2011. They had a big sign up that said volunteers needed. I didn't know anything about the fire service other than they rode fire trucks, and I was kind of in between, like trying to figure the college thing out. It already really wasn't my thing. So firehouse seemed like a natural place to go and really just hang out, and just fell in love with it right off the bat. And before long, I started to say, well, how can I do this as a career? I was spending all my time at the firehouse. I was skipping class to go to the firehouse, skipping class to run calls. And so I said, I want to do this, as a grown-up job. And after years of trying, I was lucky enough to get a full-time gig in 2015. Leading up to that, I did a year as a live-in in southern Pennsylvania, which was probably to this day, one of the best fire service experiences I've ever had. It was a combination department, and our station was primarily run by live-ins and then part-time staff, and all the part-time staff were full-time, usually for the most part in and around like the Baltimore, DC metro. So a lot of Montgomery County guys, Anne Arundel guys, Annapolis, pretty much all the major departments down there were well represented with our part-time staff. So I got to just soak it in as a very young fireman and just kind of learn about what they had to say. And it was a pretty busy ladder company, so we got to go to a lot of fires, and I had a good time, just kind of learning the job. And then I got hired full-time in 2015. I've been full-time since then, with the exception of like a 3-month gap because we picked up and we moved our lives all the way across the country to Colorado. So that was, and that's a whole different conversation to get into, but that was definitely a learning curve because at the time I had 5 years under my belt as a career firefighter. I was part of the special operations community in Virginia, and I had gotten to write some articles and teach all over the country, and that's we met out at Firemanship in Portland when I went out and presented. And so I was when we came out to Colorado, I was excited to get back on the job, and it was in the middle of COVID, and it just took a little while to find a department that was willing to hire laterals. Not that I was against starting full time or starting. I'm sorry. Not that I was against starting like entry level. I would have in a heartbeat if it meant a job, but I was fortunate to find a department hiring a class of laterals, their first official class of laterals. So I was absolutely smitten when they called me and offered me a job, and I've been with them at South Adams County Fire. I've been with them ever since. And so we're a smaller department, a growing department. We have six fully staffed career stations immediately bordering Denver to the north of Denver. So we cover everything from suburban to, we have some wildland urban interface. We cover almost all the way out to the airport. So it's a really diverse community to work in. I was able to get back on the technical rescue team out here, which is definitely something that I enjoy working with. It's no secret, I think, for anyone that knows me, that I like hanging off of ropes, and it's a big part of what I do both at work and recreationally. So getting a chance to get on the tech rescue team and then to join the guys on the tower company at Tower 24 was a big honor, because that was a spot that I was definitely interested in, but being kind of more junior for the department, even though I came in as a lateral, I didn't really feel like it was my place to put in for that. But I was when the vacancy came open, I even expressed to some more senior guys at work that I wasn't going to put in for that spot, because again, I was just trying to kind of mind my time and earn my right to be there. And they were like, dude, you should absolutely put in for it. So put in for the spot, and I got it. And I've been there now at that assignment for almost right at a year. And I couldn't be happier. It's an awesome assignment. I mean, it's a tower and a heavy rescue. I mean, how much better does it get than that? So
Yeah, I mean, and what kind of example of the culture does that set for you when you're like, hey, no, I don't think I'm going to put in for this because I'm going to respect seniority and time.
mm-hmm.
And then they're like, no, you're going to, like, they're essentially giving you permission unofficially just to do that. That's a huge thing, because I think a lot of people will just come into the job now and be like, no, I deserve this.
Yeah, no, and that's
And your mindset of being like, hey, I came here with this experience and everything else, but you're starting new. You're going to respect the process in that.
Absolutely. Well, I tell you what, I mean, you talk about culture first and foremost. I was blown away, and I don't want anything that I say to detract from anywhere else that I've ever worked, because I could brag about the guys at my last department all day long, because I think that they were some of the best I've ever worked with, and so I felt like I already kind of knew what high standards looked like until I came out here to South Adams, and just right off the bat, it was their first ever lateral academy, so I think that they were still trying to figure out how to indoctrinate us to the department. And I mean, we were, throwing 28-foot ladders the morning of day one. So there was no we signed a couple pieces of paper. They gave us some uniforms. They're like, cool, drill ground. And what I learned is that the expectations, a very young department, both just, in terms of people in their career, and then there's just young blood in general. And so as a result, everyone there, I don't want to say drinks the Kool-Aid, because that has like a bad implication to it, but everyone there is super on board with like a really high speed, low drag training culture. And the expectations are insanely high. And I remember looking around and being like, wow, I thought I was fast, and I am not fast. And so there was a learning curve for sure of just like learning how to keep up with the tempo. That was the minimum expectation there. It wasn't even like, these are what our shining stars do. This was like, in order to not be a dirtbag, this is the caliber that you're expected to perform at. And so, I mean, even now, I'm still, I still feel like I'm behind the eight ball, just trying to learn to catch up. So that was really important to me, that I didn't come in beating my chest and saying, well, I did this, and if someone else did that, like, I wouldn't care. I'm not the kind of person that cares what other people do. Like, if Proby comes in day one and takes the recliner, I'm not going to be the person that pushes him out of it, kind of deal. But I knew I wasn't going to be the guy to do that.
Right.
So just came in. No one really knew how to like treat the first lateral class, because some people were like, congratulations, hit the ground running. And then there were some other people that, they didn't know what we didn't know. And also we didn't know what we didn't know. So they kind of, we just did the Proby dance and we did the Proby book. And it was actually, I think, probably one of the most beneficial things I've ever done. I would recommend anyone in the fire service to start their career from scratch a solid like 5 or 6 years in, because I think right at that 5 or 6 year mark, you kind of hit that point where you think you know it all, and you start to get a little complacent, maybe a little lazy. And to start it from scratch, that it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to do that, but you learn so much about yourself, and it's not always comfortable lessons. I learned that there were some things that I really struggled with. But that was.
What were some of the struggles?
So this is kind of wild. The thing that I struggled with the most was I've never had an issue with confined spaces. I mean, I've done confined space rescue in the past. I've been in tight holes in. We need to edit that out. I've
I don't know what you're talking about, man.
I've been in tight spaces, um, and below ground, and that was never a problem for me. And then in 2018, I was in a roof collapse. I was pulled out of a roof collapse, and we just kind of like brushed it off and kind of laughed about it. Um, did the typical firehouse debrief, and I moved on with my life. And so years went by, and I guess this was just something that never really showed its ugly face again. And it wasn't until it was like the first or second day of that lateral academy, and they immediately threw us into our new gear and new air packs. So I was an MSA guy, so now I'm in a Scott. It's been almost a decade since I'd worn a Scott pack, and we're crawling through like tight tunnels and tubes and just like doing that kind of the confidence maze, which I've always thought was fun. To me, it was always like a jungle gym. Um, and I got into like I don't know, 6 or 8, probably not 16. I'm sure not 16. That's tight. Like probably 18 or 20, maybe 24-inch pipe, tight enough that with gear and an air pack on, well, you have to take your air pack off, do the whole profile drill. And right around that point, my vibra alert had stopped vibrating. So anyone who wears Scott knows what that means. And me being brand new to Scott, I was just like a little unfamiliar with what that meant, like how long I actually had to, and I'm in the middle of this tube, and I had like a mega panic attack. And I'll be honest, I'll be 100% honest with you here, Rob. It almost made me reconsider my career, because I was like, wow, I've never been afraid to do this job. I've worked in hurricanes, and like I said, it was pulled out of that roof collapse, and it was all just like, whatever, no big deal. And I had like a major meltdown in that pipe. And luckily, there's 3 other guys in the class with me, and they were awesome. And so we just kind of worked through it, and then that was that. And I was embarrassed, because that was like one of my first impressions for this department was this new guy from across the country that like had an anxiety attack inside of a tube. So coming back onto the job out of that lateral academy was like probably one of the biggest things that I learned. Like, okay, I really have to. This is something I really have to work on. And so I just kind of made it a part of my morning routine. Like when I check my mask, when I check my air pack, like breathe that mask down, suck it to my face, put myself in uncomfortable positions to kind of get past that. So yeah, that was a struggle, especially coming on and being like, wow, what are people going to say about, oh, this guy got scared in a tube? Like no one wants to be that guy. It sucks. So yeah.
So let's talk about January 5th, 2018.
Mm-hmm.
If you're okay with it, because
no, absolutely.
There's a good parallel here.
Okay.
Kind of take me through that day.
Yeah, for sure. So it's funny because they always talk about things going wrong, like in the worst case scenario. Like usually there's a series of kind of worst case scenarios that lead up to something going wrong. And I just recently been assigned to Engine 5, which was like the rescue engine. That was an assignment that I begged for years, and finally got an opportunity to go up and work there. So I was brand new at the company,
and
pretty new to that
Danville,
first year.
Virginia.
This is back when I was in Danville, Virginia. Yeah, thank you. Good clarification. So,
yep.
So at this point, I'm 3 years into that job, and I had begged for this assignment. Finally got it, and I was pretty new up at fives. Excuse me. And that day, both my captain and my driver at the time were off. So I had a captain who he typically worked on the south side. Funny enough, he would actually go on to eventually become my permanent captain up there, and to this day is one of the best bosses I've ever worked for. But we barely knew each other at the time, and he had been spending the last few years of his career on the south side of the city, and like so. To picture Danville's geography, like Engine 3 does not come up and run calls with Engine 5. They're on 2 opposite sides of the city. They just don't commingle. So it's just a different part of the area. And then our driver, who was Engine 4's normal driver, he was driving for us that day. So I had a guy in the seat. Both guys up front were not new to the city by any means, but that's not their normal first due or their second due. So we come in the morning, and it was super, super cold that day. I remember there was ice everywhere. And of course, we get banged down on structure fire, and we're going to be first due. And we could see this thing chugging from we turned out of the station. We were like, okay, this is a good one. This is getting it right. And so, we pull up to the front of the house. It was a pretty large house. It was in one of the nicer neighborhoods in the city. If I had to guess, probably like 2,500 to 3,000 square foot house with an attached garage, with smoke just absolutely ripping from. There was just from the eaves around the garage, basically, and then light smoke showing from the roof line of the actual house. So we decided to we pulled past, and we decided to stretch past the driveway around to the Charlie side, and because we knew that had better access to the mudroom. You picture a house that's had sliding back doors, so it goes right into a living room, and then that mudroom connects the kitchen right there. So we did a dry stretch in through the sliding glass doors. The inside of the living room, you could stand. There was like hardly any smoke on the first floor in that part of the house. That way we could. Our thought process was our first line should be, we could tell the bulk of the fire was in the garage, probably above the ceiling in the garage from what we could tell, and we wanted to try to put a line in between the garage and then the rest of the house to try to stop it there.
And do you, if you don't mind me interjecting real quick, have you gotten reports of people trapped? I mean,
no.
Obviously we're going to keep the building is occupied until we determine, but
of course,
that of course can up the ante for you as you're going in, getting those calls and that feedback from dispatch.
Right. Yeah, there was nothing. It was called in by bystanders, multiple calls, obviously. And actually the house was pretty cleared out. They were in the process of some kind of renovation process. So I don't think there was actually anyone residing in the house at the time. But we didn't know that. We didn't know that until after. So we're guns blazing until we start looking around. We're like, where's the furniture? And then, we charged a line, made a push into the garage. The conditions inside the garage were very tenable. So we did what every company does. At this point, Ladder 1 crew had come up behind us. They start doing their job and opening up the ceiling, and we just have heavy fire above us in the ceiling. Start fighting fire, and it's business as usual. It's important to note that this department that I worked for, we saw pretty regular fire duty. So I felt at the time that I was like, this was just business as usual, just a normal day, honestly. And when you're lobbing a bunch of water up into a ceiling, sheetrock starts falling down. It's like sloughing off. That's what happens when it gets wet. It's pretty normal. And so I just remember them hooking some ceiling, a bunch of fire up there, and then there was just like a big whoosh, and the whoosh knocked me backwards onto my back. So I was laying on my bottle, and I felt something really heavy come across my right shoulder. And actually, one of the guys on Ladder 1, I had previously worked on Ladder 1 for a little bit down at Station 1 downtown, and so I knew those guys really well. And one of them was kind of like a ball buster, and so my first thought, the first cognitive thing that went through my head was, did he just dead arm me? When people are messing around and they smack in the shoulder. I thought he was messing with me, because I couldn't fathom that something else worse would have happened.
Right.
And I just remember black, just went black, and embers flying everywhere. And I remember it got really, really, really hot. And my first reaction was to crawl backwards, and I couldn't because there was something kind of laying across my legs. And I think that's kind of when I noticed something's not right. Something's wrong. Something happened. And I remember reaching for my mic. We wore MSA packs, so I would always clip my mic to my chest strap. And I don't know if it came off or if just that day I hadn't clipped it, but I remember reaching for my mic because I was going to call Mayday, because I was like, oh, I think something fell down on me. And I remember reaching for my mic, and I couldn't grab it. That's a training scar. That's something we drill on calling Maydays all the time, but we never drill on finding your mic if it's not where you normally put it, which is pretty realistic, or if you can't reach it. So anyway, right about the time that I connected with my mic, I felt someone grab my shoulder strap, and they kind of deadlifted me up and out, and then they helped me to my feet. And I remember it's kind of foggy. I remember I was trying to walk. I just saw like the light, and I was trying to walk towards the light, and they kept stopping me. And it turns out I was trying to walk out a window because there was light coming in a window of the mudroom, and I was trying to walk out that window because I was so disoriented. And then they walked me out, and kind of like one on each shoulder, because we didn't know if I was messed up or not. Like all I knew is that something really heavy had fallen on me. I didn't even know there was a roof collapse at the time. And I walked out, and the safety officer at the time was my old captain from Engine 1. And he was looking like he saw a ghost. He was white, pale white, looked like he saw a ghost, and he was staring at me. And his reaction scared me because I was like, oh, am I fucked up? Like, what happened? Right.
My limb's still attached.
Like, yeah, exactly. Arm, like... but I knew I was walking, right? And I was like, okay, I'm not paralyzed, I don't think. I still have my legs. So I didn't want to go to the ambulance because I just kind of wanted to keep fighting fire. They were like, no, you're going to go get checked out. They checked me out. I had some really bad like pins and needles in my right arm, but I was like, they really wanted me to go to the hospital. I was like, that's going to be a whole thing. I don't want to do that. Like, this thing's still ripping. As we kind of pieced together what happened, there's a full-blown, complete collapse of the garage roof while we were in it. And it's wild because there's cell phone video, and I can send it to you. It's out there. It's still on the Danville Fire's Facebook page if you dig far enough, of them, of all of the evac tones on all the engines. Everyone's, pulling the air horns and stuff, and just fire just like blowing through the roof, almost like someone cut a hole in it, just complete fire venting through the roof where there's a clear massive hole in it. And I just remember looking at that being like, oh my God, I was inside when that happened. So yeah, we ended up changing bottles, and we went back in, and because of all this going down, the second floor at this point had become heavily involved. So we made we didn't. I think it would have been probably engine 2 was our next to engine. They made a hell of a push upstairs. I remember we were up behind them, and there was enough heat up there that the wall sockets were melted. So you figure a wall socket's 12 inches off the floor, and for those to be warped and melted, and that tells you right there how much heat was going on. The carpet was burnt in some places, so Matt, maybe post flashover. But we still standing.
Do you remember prior to the collapse? Like, I mean, because I'm thinking of this, like the truck company starts opening up and you can see fire.
Yeah.
Like this
just
is
dancing.
like,
just dancing
like,
across.
This is fucking awesome.
Like,
and you're just doing it, right? Like no pun intended, but you're
just fighting fire.
And
just like we always do. Yeah.
And then this happened. So there was, for yourself, there was no indication. You were living your best life.
There was no creaking,
as
no
a nozzle
popping,
man.
No snapping. The house didn't talk to me and tell me it was going to collapse.
Right.
None of that. It was just we were fighting fire. Then there was a whoosh, and the whoosh was just everything, including the thermal layer, just crashing down on top of me. Mm-hmm. It happened so fast, and then also kind of in slow motion, like in a weird way. It's hard to just really kind of describe, but it was a formative moment in my fire service career, and I didn't walk away from it like, oh, I'm traumatized. I walked away from it like, I called my wife, hey, you're going to hear online, you're going to hear on Facebook that there was a collapse and a firefighter was, had received minor injuries. Just so you know, that was me. I'm fine. And then we just went back to work. Right. I remember that the next day, we had that same captain the next day, or maybe it was later that night. I don't remember. We did a sit down debrief, and he was like, do you think we could have done something differently? And I was like, nah, man. I mean, we made a push, right? We were doing what I think was the right call in the moment. Some people would cut the garage door open and fight it. Typical garage fire kind of tactics is a truck company maintains the man door and searches the searchable space, and then the engine company cuts the garage door and fights fire through that. We didn't have a truck company hot on our heels, and we didn't know, because this was like the far north corner of the city. So the truck's coming from a ways away. So we're kind of John Wayning it for a little bit. Yeah. So I think he made a great call of, hey, because we can't do that, let's make sure let's get a line in between the fire and potentially where someone, potential victims. And that's what we did. So I don't regret that decision one bit. And I don't think that anyone made a tactical error there. You work with the information that you're given, but it's kind of how it shook out.
So we fast forward to 2020,
Mm-hmm.
and now you're in this lateral academy, and you're finding an issue in mass
Yeah.
confidence. And
Yeah.
now, how did you bridge the gap of being like, holy crap, like these two may be connected? Or
I knew immediately. Where it hit me was when I couldn't move. I was in that pipe because the mass confidence was never really an issue. I mean, we had crawled through studs and low profile stuff, or that was fine.
right,
It was when my brain recognized that feeling of trying to move and being stuck, and I just went. I
like
mean, I
almost
went right
flashback
back.
too, right? Like, yeah,
I went right back, and I was like,
yeah,
"Oh my god, my wife, like my family, get me out of here. I can't be in here anymore." And probably a lot of repressed stress, I would imagine, that
mm-hmm.
was residual from that incident. But I've done confined space stuff since then,
Yeah.
with the special operations community in Danville, on the tech rescue team there. It was never a problem. But I think it was just the context. There was added stress of, new place, new department, new part of the country, new gear, unfamiliar, somewhat unfamiliar SCBA equipment. Like I said,
Right.
I'd worn Scott as a volunteer in like 2011 to 12 or whatever. But it was all MSA after that. So, yeah, so it was just, I think the whole thing kind of came together, but it just happened, and it was that, it was just this stress was just overwhelming.
I don't know if I can ask this. I mean, I'm going to ask it anyway, but like, if you can't answer it, that's fine.
That's okay. I don't care.
Do you? Shit, I don't even know how to quite say this. Do you think that is there like so? If somebody had this happen to them, similar
Mm-hmm.
where they've been in an incident, is there any advice you would like Matt Adkins would give to Matt Adkins about this?
Yes, unpack it early. Don't put it in a box. Don't unpack it. I like to make the analogy because 2018 was a bad year for me altogether, and that's a whole different thing and a whole different topic we could get into. But the problem is that year I had quite a few very acute stress incidents, and so it just filled my glass up to the brim. And what I didn't realize is that from there on out, I was just existing with water just right at the brim of my cup.
Mm-hmm.
And if I did any kind of pressure relief, it was just enough to spill just enough out of that cup that I could put a little bit more in. But I was just maintaining, right? And so there was a lot of instances, mostly in my home life, of where that would just boil over. And then this was the first time it had professionally boiled over. And in a weird way, the stuff at home should have been more eye-opening, but because in the past I'd always prided myself in I think being decent at this job,
Mm-hmm.
that when all of a sudden I wasn't being decent at it, that really shook me hard because I was like, whoa, this is kind of my lane. And all of a sudden I can't even stay in my lane. This is freaking me out. So, and that's I think a big part of that was I hadn't really talked about it. And I think it's mostly because I didn't feel like I needed to, but
Right.
you do, so I would just say, yeah, that would be my advice and whether that's talk to a professional. A lot of the fire departments are adopting like a peer support platform, which I think is great. I think that's what we need more of. I'm very reluctant to talk to therapy professionals still. I would still encourage it. That's just me personally.
Yeah.
But I'm very open to talking to just people on the job about it because there's that sense of camaraderie and we get each other, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, don't let it pile up. Just unpack it as early as you can.
Yeah, and I mean, I cannot imagine. Like I have, and as I've, I'm gonna hit my 20 in March.
Wow, that's awesome! Congrats.
Thank you. It's hard to believe it, and then
right?
For anybody listening, it goes by that quick.
Yeah.
Everybody fucking told me that, and I didn't believe them.
Nah.
And here I am, and I'm coming up on 20. But mass confidence is one of those things. Whereas I've gotten older in the fire service, I've had that moment where I've just been like, oh shit, man, I'm freaking out here. Like,
well, we change,
right?
When you're 19 years old in the fire service, you're a kamikaze pilot, and it's really easy.
That's
just like, I don't care. Bagpipes sound pretty. I don't care. And then the older you get, Right? Am I right though?
Yeah,
Right?
that is the
Yeah.
best analogy ever.
Yeah.
Like, you're a
And the older
kamikaze
you
pilot.
get and the longer you spend on the job and you have a family at home and
Mm-hmm.
things change and it's okay to have that identity crisis of being like, wow, something that never used to scare me all of a sudden scares me, and now I need to work through it because it's a critical part of the job. You can't just be like, well, it scares me, so I just won't do that anymore, because we have to. So you're constantly kind of reinventing yourself as a firefighter on this job. So
As you developed the mindset to work through this issue with mass confidence when you were in this lateral academy, how like did it bubble up again?
no, I never really had any issues after that.
Okay.
And I went out of my way. My first reaction was to hide from doing that, and I was like, that's not an option, you know. So I just kind of collected myself mentally, and then would go out of my way. And I remember pretty early on into my first assignment, I got assigned to Engine 22 out of the academy with a stellar crew and a real go-getter captain. And I was really fortunate because the captain is a tenured combat vet, and he's also been on the job for probably 20 years. And so I was just up front. I was like, hey, Cap, you know, this is something that I got to work on. He was like, cool, we'll work on it. And then very early on, he was like, hey, we're gonna go do that maze again. Like, you're gonna confront it again. And he's like, you know, we'll be right there with you, but you got to go through it again. You can't leave it just being like, it was scary, and then trying to hide from it. And so we did, and it was fine. It was like, I remember leaving and being like, wow, that was easy. Like, that was so fun.
Right.
It was just that one moment.
Well, and like I said, like, I mean, I'm not a mental health professional, so I have my firehouse degree in psychology, but like, everything's there, right? You're in your turnout, like confined space stuff. You're not in structural firefighting gear typically when you're doing
right.
that.
Yeah, you're in BDUs and you have a little survival bottle, and it's easier to just inchworm your way through stuff. Plus, usually you're not quite as worked, because that was the very end of the day too, and that's the other thing too. I was probably like, Grossman's condition black, like heart rate of 200 something, just absolutely in lizard mode.
Yeah.
So,
but how spot on? Like, I mean, the captain being able to not only bring you back, but like give you the support of the crew.
Mm-hmm.
Like, hey, we're here. Like, not that you were struggling with, but like just that's such a solid move,
Yeah, it was smart. He knew what he was doing,
Yeah.
So.
And I need his name and number after this so I can get him on the show. But no.
Oh, you will have a heck of a time talking to him. I promise you.
So, with that being said, like, can you, we've hit on this point about this incident and how you've overcome it and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You started out in a smaller volunteer department. I want to go back a little bit here.
Sure. Yeah.
And then you transitioned into this live-in program in Southern. Which department is it?
So the department at the time when I joined was Eden Fire Company, and I was there during their merger when they basically became an entity of Manheim Township Fire Rescue, which was a three-station combination agency. So the ink was barely dry on my name tag when they made that transition.
Right.
But I was there kind of to see both sides of it.
So a department that maybe did, and I think, like, what, 200-300 calls a year to Manheim Township, which is going to do a couple more.
Yeah, we went from, so I want to say and now looking back in the grand scheme of things, it wasn't busy by numbers, but yeah, my first volunteer company, which is in Lehigh County, Pennsylvania, which is my hometown, that's where I grew up. They ran maybe 300 a year, and then this company was running, maybe 1,000 and change. That's not the whole department. That was just that station,
right?
Which ran just an engine for the most part, an engine and a tiller ladder truck. It was awesome. That was like the coolest. They gave me an ultimatum. They're like, look, you either have to start driving the engine or tilling the back end of the tiller. And I was like, that's an easy decision. So I still miss that. I missed the hell out of that. I want them to get a tiller at work so bad. And Colorado has like this beef with tillers. There's one department, Greeley, that has one. Everyone's like, we only want rear mounts. And it's like, all right, if you say so.
You're really missing out on the fun.
I don't want to hear you complain when you can't get into these neighborhoods.
So the live-in life is a different life. Now,
Yeah.
I never was a live-in. I was a volunteer member, and it's funny they call it a local member of Hyattsville, down in
Okay.
Burgess County, Maryland. But
Yeah. Yeah.
every year when I first started, the live-ins would go away for a week to the Big Hat Beach week. So I would go down and man the firehouse, and I would be a
Yeah.
live-in for a week, um, which was not anything like what those guys experienced as live-ins of the company, but and of the bunk room. Kind of talk about, can you hit on some of these issues, like things that
Absolutely.
about being a live-in, because I think we talk about it, and I like tell people all the time, like, hey, if you're looking for a live-in program, go to Hyattsville.
Yeah.
But like, and they're like, why? And I'm like, because it's an awesome experience.
Mm-hmm.
But then I can't really follow it up with anything other than like, well, they'll go to fires, like
Mm-hmm.
they've got a tiller truck, so there's that.
Right.
Like, kind of hit on. Can you hit on some of that
Yeah.
stuff?
Yeah. Well, I mean, first of all, and my experience, I can't even compare it to like a Prince George County experience, right? Because just the call volume and then the volume of fire that they see, and there's times that I look back and I say, man, if I had even known, I didn't even know what PG County was when I
Right.
started volunteering. I Google searched live-in fire departments in Pennsylvania. That's what I searched, and this department came up. I found out that the live-in thing was an option from a friend of mine who had done one, kind of outside of Reading. So he was like, hey, if you're looking for just experience, and at the time, and it's crazy how much it's changed, but at the time it was so competitive to try to get onto any fire job, and you remember it. Like,
Mm-hmm.
I remember my first fire department test that I took was for the city of Allentown, and I think I showed up wearing my volunteer job shirt, like with a pager on my belt, right? It's just, you don't know what you don't know. I never had a mentor to be like, okay, look, put on a suit and tie, go out. So, and it was just so competitive at the time, and I was just clueless. I had no idea how to even broach getting hired at a fire job. So someone recommended this live-in program, and I went and I rode along with them and just got to ride on the tiller. And they were like, "Isn't this cool?" And I was like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Cool. If you ever move in, like, you don't even get to think about this until you finish your engine book." And I was like, "That's fine, whatever." Um, but they kind of welcomed me with open arms, and I instantly, I gravitated towards the people there. I would recommend a live-in program to any young firefighter who is trying to get on the job, but maybe doesn't have the mentorship, or they don't know how to play the game yet. And I would highly recommend one that is a combination department, because then you have that benefit of working with. Because I remember like prepping for interviews, because at the time I was carpet bombing the East Coast in applications. I was in DC's process. I had applied for Philly. I had tested for Arlington and Alexandria and Fairfax, like everywhere in and around, everywhere that was hiring. I would apply and go test and occasionally interview for. Um, and I just remember talking to those guys and being like, hey, help me through the interview questions. And that was the first time that I ever had someone on the job. I think they were like a lieutenant in Montgomery County, Maryland, so they were doing something right. And they were like, yeah, don't tell them that the reason they should hire you is because you're an aggressive firefighter. Like, they don't care. It's a numbers game. Like, you gotta play the game. You have to learn how to play the game to get on the job, kind of deal.
Mm-hmm.
And then on top of that, for us, and every live-in program is different, but our program was you had to either be employed, part-time, or a full-time student. So most of the live-ins were paramedic students, and then I was one of the few that wasn't a student. I was just working part-time on an ambulance, just kind of as a way to basically meet the minimum employment requirement to be allowed to live at this firehouse for free. And so you live there 365, and we had to put on the schedule. Like, if we wanted to go out for a day, you had to put it on the schedule. Like, basically, you had to schedule your time off. We had bunk rooms, and it was honestly almost like a college dorm attached to the firehouse. And it was one of the best experiences of my life. I mean, I got to live with these guys for 24/7, literally 365, and we were always on the rig. If we were at the station and there was a call, you were on the rig. We had riding assignments, so you start out on the engine. You do your Proby book on the engine, and then you do your truck book, which is like your truck probationary book. And then to graduate the truck, and now I look back and I'm like, man, I don't even think this would fly anymore. But like, to graduate your truck book, like, the final thing was they put the stick all the way extended. So it was a 100-foot stick at 70, 72 degrees, whatever the computer would lock it out at. Which I can't imagine there's anyone listening to this podcast that hasn't climbed an aerial, but to someone that had 75 degrees on an aerial feels damn vertical, right?
Yeah.
And with all of our gear in an air pack, we had to climb all the way to the top and back down in 2 minutes and 30 seconds.
Oh, wow.
Which is climbing at a pace that now I look back and I'm like, if I tried to do that now, I'd probably fall off the thing.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember doing it and coming back down and them showing me that time, and I was like 2:45. And they were like, well, you can wait till tomorrow. And I was like, I had already pumped I was like, no, I'm just going to do it again. And so I just did it again. And I just barely beat it. Right. And that was then they give you the truck patch, and I should have prepared myself better. I would have gone up and gotten it, but the truck patch was just this really cool thing that you earn by getting basically earning your right to ride that ladder truck. It was cool because the truck ran the calls. The engine only really ran first and second due, but the truck ran all over the county. Right. It was us in Roarstown, 67 truck that we ran. We were on almost half the boxes, it seemed, 3/4 of the boxes in the county, it seemed. So we got to go to fires. So you wanted to be on the truck. It was just such a cool experience,
So I think too, the thing that I'm pulling away is there is a standard, right? You did it in 2 minutes and 45 seconds, and you were just
they're like,
no. Well, I guess you can do it, and I'm going to do it again.
Yeah, they're like, no, that wasn't good enough. No, you're right. And that standard is huge, and that's my first exposure to a real kind of standard. And I got to tread lightly when I say this, and I think when I did my fire talk, and I maybe wasn't quite as diplomatic then as I wish I was, because the last thing I want to do is alienate the guys that I started with as an early volunteer. I still have very, very fond memories of my time there. But it was a community volunteer fire department, and they're just doing the best that they could do with what they had. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. As a matter of fact, that's I think that's kind of more heroic than anything, because they're just everyday guys that are showing up to help people, right? And that's not to say they weren't educated in the fire. They were going to classes and stuff, but the standard there was showing up, honestly. I mean, as a very early volunteer, I didn't have Fire One before I was going interior. I mean, very early on, they were like, here's how to work the pack. Don't let me turn around and you not be there, kind of thing, right? So There wasn't much of a standard. The standard was just hold on for the ride and don't die. And so all of a sudden I'm at this department and we have this Proby book, and we have guys coming around and I'd go, hey, can we, and the story I talked about in FireX was, I was like, hey, can we go throw ladders? And he's like, yeah. So we threw ladders all day long. And ladders has always been a weakness of mine. I'm 5'6", I'm 170. So you have these big 6 foot big guys, massive big guys. Are like, here's how to do it, and then they do it, and then you're like, I don't even have the ergonomics to do that. So we spent all day throwing ladders, and I was like, cool, will you sign me off? And he's like, absolutely not. You have a ways to go. And that was my first time ever. I was like, oh, there's a standard. This isn't just show up and do your best and have fun, and we'll pat you on the back and give you a badge, and that was again, I can track that back. That was another very formative experience in my fire service career, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's no different than climbing that ladder and just not quite making the time and having to go up and do it again. But I remember, I'll never forget getting that patch and being like, wow, I've earned the right to ride this thing,
You made it.
I made it, right?
Yeah.
And then getting to learn to till on it, and that was just the coolest freaking thing in the world. And that was my first time learning what the assignments were on a ladder truck. I always thought, ladder truck, in rural and suburban volunteer world, a ladder truck just shows up and puts a ladder up, and a lot of times just sprays water on the roof, right?
Yeah.
Ladder
goes up, building goes down.
It wasn't like a tree. Yeah, exactly. And and so it was we have a job, the inside guys search, the outside guys, bang ladders and cut holes in roofs. So I was like, this is different. This is something new. So it was cool. But the exposure, I mean, I would equate, 1 year there to probably 3 years anywhere else, because you're there every single day. You don't go home. You're always there. And And so,
and that's like, I think that people talk about, like sports, right? Like I was listening to a TED talk the other night about somebody who, she was talking about her early wanting to get on the varsity team and all these things that she was doing to prepare, like sleeping in her basketball shoes, like shooting baskets in the morning, and just like picturing all these things, and doing all this mental prep. When you're in a live-in program, when you're in a firehouse like that, and for me in Hyattsville, I would go down on my 3 days off. So I'd be there for every lick of time that I could get before I knew I had to get back on the road to drive back to New York to go back to work. Like you are, you are surrounded by the culture of the fire service.
yeah,
You are literally inundated. You're living and breathing it, and it is enveloping you. And that's one of those things where, like, you just, I don't want to say you don't get to screw off, because there certainly could be opportunities for that, but like you are there.
Yeah, I mean, we did screw off. I mean, it was
Right.
like a almost like a college dorm with fire
Mm-hmm.
trucks in it, and we did everything that 20-year-old, 19, whatever shitheads would do in a college dorm, except we were doing it in a fire station, and we were doing it in a fire station without alcohol. We had like a super strict no alcohol policy, and so we just found ways to kind of wholesomely, mind our time there in between running calls. And it's different. It's different than a come from home volunteer. It's different than being on the job in a career department. It's totally different. And any young firefighter that comes up to me and says, "Hey, I'm trying to like bridge that gap, but I don't know how to do it yet," I'm like, "Do a couple years at a living program. Go far from home. If you're in Colorado. I've had this conversation with young firefighters here before.
Mm-hmm.
Go to Prince George County." Or go somewhere. Go somewhere far from home that has a program that's busy enough that you're not just gonna be bored all the time,
Right.
And has a good enough culture where you're gonna learn how to be like a firefighter.
Well, and that's another thing you talked on before is you said about the combination system and volunteering in that, but also like the members of that company who were on the job in Montgomery County, DC, Baltimore, like they're there for the right, like they're not there to be shitbags. They're there to mentor, and if you put the effort in, they're going to meet you and then push you further. So like that was one of the things where I learned hard lessons, going to Hyattsville and having to eat crow, and just like some of the people, like I'll never be able to pay them back, right? Like, because they paved my career with good examples.
Yeah.
And they also didn't put up with my bullshit,
Oh, I mean, that's a perfect way of putting it. I was the worst 2 and 20 fireman that ever existed when I moved into that living program. I thought I knew everything because I had Firefighter 1. Because that wasn't a requirement at my last department. That was like extra credit, And so I was like, I have Fire 1 and EMT. I'm God's gift to firefighting. And really early on, they were just like, just laughed me out of the room. And there's a few guys that at the time I was like afraid of because they were hard asses, and I was like, I don't want them to talk down to me, because you're just immature and young. And now looking back, I was like, God, they were good mentors, and they were never lousy to me. I've never been treated poorly in the fire service, so I'm very fortunate. I think I had probably a better experience than a lot of people have. I've never been treated poorly, other than like isolated incidents of people just having shitty personalities. But like even then, like they did a really good job at knocking me down, but in like a constructive way, and in a way that made me like idolize them. Like I kind of hated them in the moment, but now looking back, I'm like, wow, they were good. They really knew what they were doing in a mentorship capacity. And we didn't all the paid guys there, like they were not collecting paychecks. I mean, this was a side hustle for them. They were already on the job somewhere else, and so they probably lived closer to here, and they just wanted to work at another fire station. That's pretty impressive now looking back, because I don't know if I would even want to like work part-time at a fire station right now, just because sometimes it's just too much. So for those guys to be doing that just goes to show how ate up with the job they were anyway. So it was the best possible place for me to kind of come of age within the fire service and learn what the job was about and if it was for me, and also learned that it wasn't for everyone because there was a lot of people, live-ins, that I think anywhere else would be considered great firefighters. And I looked up to them. A lot of them were there before I had got there, so I looked up to them. And they got dismissed because they weren't meeting a standard. And that was, again, one of those first moments in my career where I was like, oh, not everything in this job is a participation trophy. Because, like, you know, when you take Fire 1 at a community college, you show up,
Right.
you pass the written test, and you don't fumble the chainsaw or the nozzle, and they give you a Firefighter 1 certificate. Not to downplay anyone going through it, but, this is my first time. I was like, oh, there's consequences. Like, if you don't meet a standard, they're not just going to, like, pat you on the back and be like, okay, buddy, like, they'll show you to the door. I was like, oh, wow, I don't want to do that. So it was a humbling learning experience to see that happen. And they're good friends of mine, and it sucked. It sucked to see them have to leave, and, you just wish them the best and you move on with your career. But
Matt, I like to talk about mentors just because I think mentorship is a huge thing. Mm-hmm. Who's a mentor for you that, if you're comfortable talking about it, who shaped your career in a positive way?
I have so many. I have a lot, honestly. It would be really hard for me to, like, nail down everyone, but if I had to pick a few names, I mean, I don't know what you're looking for, because
it's something that I like talking about, because I think that, our careers are shaped by people who, and sometimes I don't even think they realize they're being a mentor.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're in the right place at the right time to smack us in the back of the head, or to grab us, by the face piece, so to speak, and say, like, hey, knock it off. Get your head in the game.
Yeah. I mean, I could just pick out a few from just every stage of my career. I have a couple for every stage I've gone through. When I first started as a very early volunteer, one of the assistant chiefs there, Mike Garris, I still have very fond memories of. He would just bend over backwards to make sure I was getting the entry level attention that I needed, and he, now looking back, put up with a lot of just my early energy. But he was the guy who, go into a fire, I'd be like, hey, Mikey, can I put an air pack on? And he'd be like, kind of roll his eyes and be like, probably look around and be like, well, you're the only other one in this truck, so yeah, sure, go ahead, put an air pack on, and don't get away from me, kind of thing. I still have super fond memory. I wish I had more pictures from those days. I took a million, and just in, life moving on in different cell phones, I don't really have anymore. And those were super fond memories because everything was so new and fun. And then, you move on, and at Eden, there's a dude by the name of Ryan Spangler. He was one of our, he was a previous live-in that would still come around. At the time, he was an Arlington firefighter. Now he works for Harrisburg. Fun fact, I think he just graduated, not this past one, but the one previous, he graduated the Georgia Smoke Diver program. And I think he was the first Pennsylvanian to ever graduate the Georgia Smoke Diver program. So that tells you everything you need to know about him.
Mm-hmm.
But now he works for Harrisburg, going to fires probably every shift. But he was the guy that would come around, and I would be like, oh, great, he's here. He's going to make us train. And I'm so much better because of him, even to this day. I think he was a very, very early mentor of mine. There's so many. Steve Miller and Stephen Truesdell, two Annapolis firemen. They were, just instrumental in, I think, who I became as a firefighter in the fire service. Two very different personalities. Steve was kind of our resident goofball, and I guess they're both Steve. But then Truesdell was like a hard ass, and took the job super seriously, and taught us that it's not okay to not take the job seriously. I just, every time those guys would come around, I was like, I'm going to learn something today, one way or another. And then I got my first big boy fire job, and I had a lot of mentors there, but I think my biggest one is just I got to end my career there working for Captain Nate Sargent. He was the captain that pulled me out of that fire, but then he went on to end up getting assigned to 5, became my first captain. He was there for so many major moments in my career. Um, the collapse. My first day ever driving a fire truck, like on shift actively, was that literally first night I was working for him, which was also, it wasn't my first fatal fire, but it was my first fire, that my first night driving, my first fire driving, and it was a ripping fire that unfortunately the woman didn't survive. So we unpacked all that together, and he just taught me so much about leadership. We worked Hurricane Florence and Hurricane Michael together. I think we spent collectively 16 hours during Hurricane Michael, like just in swift water making rescues, and so we shared a boat for most of that time. And I just got to really see what a working boss looked like, and what it looked like to have a supervisor who was able to be a hands-on fire officer and also just a blue collar hard worker, and then simultaneously just how to just stay, not to be cliche, but how to stay like calm in the storm. To this day, I mean, I really idolize kind of what he brought to the table on a fire ground. I mean, it's so hard for me to just like single out individuals because there's so many others. I mean, I worked with one of my best friends, Trevor. We worked together. We rode backwards together for most of my career. And I don't know if you know Timmy McGow, but we he was down in North Carolina, but we worked together on the training circuit a bit right towards the end of me being in the Southeast, and I wish I would have stuck around a little longer to get to develop that relationship with him. But we've stayed in touch. He's more of like I think just like a life mentor. I've just seen a lot of the stuff he's done. Brad. Brad touched a lot of lives before he was taken too soon, and when we were getting full alarm.
For those out there, just who's Brad? Because a lot of people won't be familiar.
No, that of course, yeah. No, that's important. So Brad Clark, he was lieutenant with Engine 6 in Hanover, Virginia, which is a little outside of Richmond. And he was just like, I mean, such a vibrant figure, super outspoken on like the conference and the teaching scene, and he was everywhere. And so like if you went to conferences up and down the East Coast, you knew Brad. And if you went to Portland, you knew Brad. Like he was just everywhere, right? So we crossed paths at conferences, and we had a lot of mutual connections, and so that kind of formed a bond. And I'll never forget drinking beers in Alexandria after Andy Frederick's training days, and realizing that I had an academy brother who he had previously taught in an academy because like this guy had come from his department, and so we kind of connected over the fact that we had this pretty close mutual friend, and from there on out, I really looked up to him. He was just this kind of larger than life guy that seemed to have family on lockdown, and that was just a great training mentor, a big part of the 350 line cadre who brought a lot of awesome engine company stuff to the table. And just really gravitated towards his personality and who he was as an individual. And
I don't have a lot of regrets in the fire service, because mainly they take up a lot of time in my brain that's not necessary.
It's true.
I have heard so much about Brad Clark, and I am it is truly one of those. He's one of those people who I am sorry I never got the chance to meet. And there's a couple others that like and just like what you did, like when guys talk about them, there is a conversation, like the conversation is passionate, and there's a passion of people talking about them because of their passion they ignited in them.
Yeah.
So Brad's definitely somebody who I'm super aggravated that I never got to meet him, and it's why I try to take a little bit more of an aggressive approach of shaking hands now. So
I would recommend that to especially newer people coming on the job. Like, take the picture is kind of like a trendy thing right now, but it's very true. And then also, just shake the hand, get to know someone. We closed down a bar in Petersburg, and we just talked shop until they literally kicked us out. And it was, I think, during that conversation that I was like, hey, we're kind of thinking of starting a training group in the Danville area, because there was nothing in South Central to bring conferences in, or to bring training, outside training in. And he was like, and I guess, I don't know, I think in a weird way, I was maybe asking for his,
like a blessing,
not permission, almost, but like his blessing, like, hey,
yeah.
like, is this weird if we do this? Because like, I don't think I know everything, but we're trying to more so create a platform to bring in training because it doesn't really exist right here. And he was like, do it, absolutely do it. And he was so supportive, man. And then, anytime I had questions about something, I text him or Snapchat him or whatever. And I just wish I knew him longer, And
yeah.
There's a lot of people out there that have way more and way longer, memories of it, but yeah, so he huge influence on my fire service career. Kind of encouraged me to really take the step into like the training educational side of the fire service, because I was like, wow, like I saw how he made me feel. I was like, I want to do that to other people. Like I want to get them, passionate about the job and riled up and like ready to go back to work and make changes that serves our citizens better, right? Like I was like, that's cool. So yeah, those are just, the list could go on and on. Those are some mega mentors in my career.
I like it because it kind of goes through your career, and sometimes there's people who have a specific person, but this is great because you not only have those people who helped you through your career, but each one of them you kind of painted them into the appropriate section of your life as you're going. So,
and those are just the personal. There's so many more, but those are like very personal connections, right? Like I could say people on the circuit or people who have written articles that were all of that obviously has mentored me in multiple ways. But those are just people that like when you say mentors in the fire service, that's where my brain goes. Is these people. So
Matt, we've been going on for an hour. Mm-hmm. We kind of got to wrap things up here a little bit, but where can people find you?
They could find me in Colorado right now in Commerce City, riding Tower 24. If you're looking for, I don't have much
social channels. Like if they wanted to reach out to you, follow something up.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll happily, man. If you want to jot down my cell number, my email. I don't know if you want to put those in a blurb or whatever.
Yeah,
I'm readily available. Yeah.
If you want to give your phone number to the internet, by all means.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm going to do that, maybe, but feel free to hand it out if someone asks for it. I guess I would say.
Can they find you on social media?
Yeah, they sure can. I'll give you the link for my Facebook and my Instagram. I'll give you the link for the full alarm stuff. Unfortunately, one of the platforms was hacked, and the other one we just haven't really done much with full alarm. I moved out to here, and there's already a very robust training company network. And so it wasn't really my place to. I'm just still trying to learn my job here, and so I was like, maybe I'll pump the brakes. And the guys just because there were two other partners, Trevor and Alan, with Full Alarm, and they're still very actively involved in the training circuit, but they just have family and career stuff going on, so they're not really running the page or anything, which is fine. So don't be surprised if you go on and there's a ton of stuff probably from 2017 or 18 until like 2020 when I left, but there's not much more after that. But I'll put all those links down. Yeah, happy to answer any questions. I don't have much to bring to the table. I was kind of surprised he still wanted to chat because I'm like I'm just a firefighter doing his job. I know that's kind of cliche now, but it's true.
It's all right, So, well, Matt, thank you for sitting down and. There we go. My mouse stopped working. Thank you for sitting down and talking with me today.
Thanks for having me,
man.
Yeah.
This was fantastic. Stick around for a minute. I'm going to do our outro here. But everybody, this is Rob, Frontline Mindset with National Fire Radio. Matt Adkins, out in Colorado. This man is a rock star. Also, we didn't even get to hit on the mountain climbing stuff and everything else. We'll have to follow that up with another conversation one day because it's a really good story he told me when he was long story short, Matt saved me and Molly from a brief bit of sanity at a wedding that we were out in Colorado for, and thank God we got to see him, or else we probably would have gone to the loony bin. But he gave me a great story about going on a hike and coming across some people who were wearing like flip flops and like, you know, tank tops, and a storm system came in. I'm overselling it here a little bit, but you know. Anyway,
it's another day in the mountains, man.
Yeah, this is Rob, National Fire Radio, Frontline Mindset. Matt Adkins, thank you for joining. We'll see you guys out there. Stay safe.
Okay.
National Fire Radio.